Hello there and welcome back to another review. So talking of like cult movies I remember, films from my childhood and things like that, I thought we'd have a look at Santa Claus the movie today, made back in 1985 and starring David Huddleston, Dudley Moore and John Lithgow. Now this was a movie, whilst not being one of like, I can never say it's one of my favourites of all time, but I mean, make no mistake, the film didn't do well, and I think, you know, it's a complete box office bomb, to be honest with you, but it's still a film, despite all of that I still remember very fondly, and I always associate it with Christmas. Like in the UK when I was growing up, this film was always on around Christmas Eve, and you know when a film almost like becomes part of the tradition just as much as Christmas Day itself, this was one of them movies. It was more often than not always guaranteed to be in that period, like just after you've broken up from school up to around Christmas Eve. It would usually be on around in that little time frame there, more often than not Christmas Eve, along with films like Scrooge with Bill Murray was another favourite of mine. Now the director here, whose other credits include the Supergirl movie and Jaws 2. I'm not going to pronounce the director's name because I will probably say it wrong. I think even John Carpenter was offered the director's chair for this movie as well. I mean, when you look at some of the casting choices for this movie, it's actually quite fascinating for the role of like BZ, which eventually went to Lithgow. I mean, some of the casting choices that were in talks or even offered the role, we had Dustin Hoffman, we had Burt Reynolds, I think even Johnny Carson was offered the role at some point. So it's one of them movies when you think, I wonder what could have been if like Lithgow didn't actually take the role of BZ. I think even Harrison Ford was offered it. I think I read that somewhere that even like the Ford was offered it. But as I say, Burt Reynolds as well. I mean, just crazy. I think I mentioned Burt. So now this film is not as perfect. I mean, it's not perfect by any means. And in many ways, the film is very much a movie of two halves. But the first half of this film is about as Christmassy as a film as you will ever get. Like the first half of this movie, I will be sort of picking it apart a little bit, so apologies if you do, this is a film you have a soft spot for. I do too, but I've just watched it again excuse me, recently, and it's funny watching it again after all this time and you think, oh, why did I like that so much as a kid? But as I say, the first half is so Christmassy, like it just evokes Christmas, or it feels like Christmas, and it really gives off that vibe really well. And like when we, with David Huddleston as Claus and him getting used to his new role, it really does evoke so many Christmas vibes and feels. And then the film goes off to like an entirely different plot, which of course I will get into over the course of the review, and it loses its way and its footing completely. Like it doesn't sort of regain it. It starts off okay, and it's almost like they just run out of things to say, and then it goes off, second half of the movie, it goes off a complete tangent, and it doesn't ever fully recover, but it does lose its footing. And though the film is called Santa Claus the movie, I mean, you'd assume it's meant to be about Santa Claus. Yes, it is, but only for like the first 40 minutes, and then the film shifts focus to Patch, played by Dudley Moore. It's like I mentioned, it's like they didn't know what else to do with the character of Santa, and threw some other things in to sort of compensate for that. And the last third or so of the movie just is muddled. Is the only way I can describe it. It's just completely muddled. But again, watching it as a kid, absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved this movie, and it was just something when I say I loved it, I think that's actually a bit of an overstatement. It was just something I had to watch over Christmas. Like Santa Claus, the movie's on, got to watch it. As I say, just become part of the tradition. And this was one of those movies that, despite being made in 1985, it feels and looks like it was made even 10 years earlier than that. Many could argue that Lithgow is probably the best thing in the movie, and that is largely true. He probably is the best thing in the movie. I mean, it'd been amazing to imagine if it was Harrison Ford. That would be crazy, what that would have been like. There's plot holes, there's product placement, and as I say, at the time it didn't do well. But I think over the years, the film has been given a lot less of a tough time. And one thing the film does very well is that it feels like a Christmas film, and that's I'm not going to try and bash this movie unnecessarily. But it does feel like a Christmas movie, and that's one thing that is really strong that it has going through it. Like, it is a Christmas movie through and through. And to be honest, even now, Christmas time without this on TV, it just wouldn't be the same. It just wouldn't be the same. Not necessarily saying I'm going to still watch it when it's on at Christmas, but it is one of them films like I expect it to be on. I mean, I think, okay, it's not a good movie, but it's a Christmas movie. And whilst not perfect, the first 40 minutes or so, I think, are actually very good. I think for a kids' film, I think it's more than, just serviceable for a Christmas film. It does the job, what it's meant to do. But I remember even watching this for the first time when I was like, I don't know, 5 or 6. I think it was probably one of the first Christmas films I actually even sort of recall actually seeing. But I remember seeing it around that time, and like, even now, reminiscing about that, I think even then I thought, why are we now following Patch? Like, why are we following Dudley? Like, I don't want this. Who's Patch? I want to follow Santa. I want to stick with Santa Claus. It's Santa Claus the movie. I want to stick with Santa throughout the movie. But no, we go off and follow Patch and his little, sort of entrepreneurship that he takes on in New York. It will always be a staple Christmas movie for me, and Christmas, like I say, without it just wouldn't be the same. But we're going to it a little bit now and just see how Santa Claus the movie holds up. So we open with this granny telling this story about the ice mountains and the Vendigums, which is just another name for elves, in case you're wondering. And a little thing, she has about 20 children, right? This granny, and I think we're meant to be. I think it's meant to be like the Middle Ages or something around that time period. Not too sure, but I think it's meant to be the Middle Ages. So Mr. Claus, or Uncle Claus as he is known, and his Mrs. Anya turn up and start handing out presents on their way to their next stop with their reindeer Donna and Blitzen, who gives up because of the cold, and they all begin to like freeze to death because of the snowstorm. Like their reindeer completely give up completely. And to be fair, some of the puppets on the reindeer are not too bad, especially on the close-up shots. Then this great light appears in the sky, and then Dudley Moore and his elves appear, who reveal they've been waiting for him for a long time. You will get, the thing is, watching this again, you will get very tired with the amount of lines Patch uses mixing up words with the word elf. The jokes with the elf become so it's tiresome even before he's began doing it. It's not funny the first time, but the trouble is they keep doing it. Not just here, they keep doing it throughout the movie. Such classic lines as "He gives me a real feeling of elf confidence," and that reindeer needs some elf control, and it just goes on, and that's just touching the surface. There's so many. It just gets tiresome. I say it wasn't even funny the first time, but when you got lines like elf control and elf confidence, it's just, oh god. So Santa and his wife now find out that the children of the world are all theirs, and that they will live forever. So that's not the sort of thing you encounter. So every children in the world is now ours, right? Every children in the world. Remember that, because you don't see a hell of a lot of the world in this movie. You basically see New York, and that is it. So it turns out they're going to live forever. Patch introduces Santa to like some other reindeer, and he fancies himself sort of as like an inventor of sorts. So this is where the film really does flow, and it feels like a Christmas film. With him, like the whole idea of the origin of Santa, how he become Santa, and how he met the elves and everything like that. Yeah, it feels like a Christmas movie. They really could have. That's all they needed to do. They could have just told a 90 to 100 minute story about how Santa become that, but they sort of crashed through it a little bit. So for the last 50 minutes of the movie, they've got to think of something to fill up the time. So, we get them making toys, getting the outfit made, lots of dancing, of course. And in all fairness, David Huddleston, to me, I think he's a perfect looking Santa. I don't think many have come close. Maybe Kurt Russell. I think he looked the part of Santa Claus. But I think David Huddleston here really does evoke. He's got the right look on his face. I think he's got the right frame, and he just looks great. Suddenly, Burgess Meredith turns up as the head ancient elf with the longest beard the world has ever seen, and it even needs to be held by two elves. This beard is so long. He says the prophecy has come true, gets told that time travels with him and the night is endless for Santa. Basically, time does not apply, sort of when he's out delivering presents, so he's no rush because time there's no barriers to it. They cover the reindeer's food with magic powder again. All well and good so far, not perfect of course, but it feels like Christmas. So years and years go by. Santa is getting used to his job, making lists of who is naughty and who is nice. Then it's suggested that Santa gets an assistant as he's sort of exhausted from the workload. Santa's completely knackered, right? Santa's wiped out. Though now, bearing in mind we're about 45 minutes into at this point, aside from being made Santa, in terms of plot, that's all that's really happened at this point. And now, like I said, it's like they've got no story to tell whatsoever. Let's have a film about how this guy becomes Santa. Right, we're 35 to 40 minutes into the film. He's become Santa already. What do we do for the rest of it? So a guy's become Santa. So the filmmakers knew they needed to add something, right? They got to fill this out. We've got to add something at the end. So after competing, Patch gets the job. And look out for the product placement of like McDonald's in the movie. It's just everywhere. There's so much product placement. And we meet this homeless kid, Joe, right? And this rich girl, Cornelia, right? And he sometimes hangs around her house, and she gives him a plate of dinner with a can of Coke. More product placement there as well. So, after spotting Joe on his rounds, Santa makes a pit stop. And worth noting at this point that you never, ever see Santa anywhere else, right? You don't see him anywhere else. He just seems to be limited to New York City, right? So, like the children of the world, they're all yours. No, Santa's really, when you see him out on his rounds, and bearing in mind, every time you see him, a year's passed at this point, a year's gone by, he's only delivering in New York. As I say, the rest of the movie is like this is the only place that he actually ever delivers to. So he meets Joe, and I do love when he says it's Christmas Eve. Do you know what that means? And Joe's like, yeah, it means you and the rest of the winos are out of a job for another year, which I think is, watching it again recently, that line did make me laugh because it's just accusing him of being a bum. So he takes him for a ride on his sleigh, and they attempt the super duper looper maneuver, but like sort of Donna isn't up to it. And they go to Cornelia's house. She wakes up, finds them, and Santa bails. And they are like, "What a guy, right? What a guy!" Which just reminds me of the Red Dwarf Ace Rimmer episode. So Patch's like toys that he's made start falling apart. Now, if this story was true, just think how much parents and families would save on Christmas every year. Like, must save a fortune. If like presents were delivered by Santa and like he was delivering all these toys and things like this. Parents would save a fortune. Parents would save an absolute fortune. Though saying that, it does still have the notion that most kids would be happy with like a wooden doll and a wooden train. I don't think kids even then would have been happy with just that, to be honest with you. So the broken toys like come back, and Patches leaves, like he leaves in disgrace. Now this is when I was like, why are we focusing on Patch and this like Lex Luthor clone in BZ? Like why is the film going down this route? But watching it again recently, without Lithgow's over-the-top performance, this second half would have been amazingly empty, right? Without John Lithgow in this film would have been absolutely, the last half hour would have been completely dire. But so it's thanks to his, I know he's probably not a fan of this movie, but thanks to his role in that last 50 minutes, he really does bring something to the table, because it needed it. It needed that character with a burst of energy, somebody who's a bit over the top, say sort of bit like a Lex Luthor type of character, but just with toys. BZ owns like a toy company, and his products are hazardous and his company in trouble. Patch arrives in New York. Again, like I say, only stays in New York. Patch arrives in BZ's office and wants to use his factory to make something special, realising he doesn't want money, and BZ is out of ideas. He agrees, and also like to give them away free, as it might help his public image, because he's in, like, as I say, he's got a bad rep, his toys are hazardous. He's looking for his next big thing that he can market, that he can do. And I love when he asked, sort of Towser, his assistant, what colour he likes, and he replies, puce, and BZ goes, sometimes I worry about you. Which there's a few little lines, taking the elf jokes aside, there are little moments, little lines there that are quite funny, but they're just so few and far between. So at this point, we're about 1 hour and 10 minutes in, and we're still getting lines like, oh, an elf portrait. So like I say, it doesn't stop. The elf jokes just keep on happening. So like when Santa's making something for Joe, and Santa's he's missing Patch at this point as well. It should have been called Santa Claus, or should have been the Patch movie with special guest Santa Claus, is what it should have been called. Probably would have made a bit more sense. So it turns out BZ is like Cornelia's step-uncle, right, which is a total plot convenience, and is mentioned once and not spoke of or referred to ever again. He's like her step-uncle. That is it. We learn that, and then it's just thrown away. It's just not mentioned again. So may as well just not put it in there. So suddenly Patch takes off in this like flying car thing on Christmas Eve. Santa visits Joe again, and Santa is all down in the dumps like, well, at least I have one friend left. Like Santa in this film, like he becomes such a downer. He becomes such, it's like, oh, at least you're my friend, Joe. And it's like, what about your wife and all the other elves that have been helping you? What about them? You're not worried about them? Well, at least somebody believes in me. So he gives Joe this wooden chipping, and he's like, wow, cool, excellent, like with this wooden chipping that he's made. Patch's toys like that he's made is like lollies that cause people to float. Just makes some lollies and sprinkles them in this magic powder. And Patch wants to come home, but Beezy wants him to make stronger candy canes that will cause people to fly, and wants to launch sort of Christmas 2 on March the 25th. And Santa, like at this point, he's all but now given up on Christmas, right? Like I say, he becomes such a downer. He's given up on Christmas completely, and he says no one cares anymore. Well, Santa, you was only delivering to New York, according to this movie. So, maybe go and see some of the rest of the world, deliver to some other kids. So Corny and Joe overhear Beezy saying that Santa is finished. Beezy grabs Joe, and of course we find out the candy canes with magic powder, if they get too much heat, they explode. Well, it goes without saying, doesn't it? Candy canes with magic powder, we all know, if they get heated up, they're going to explode. It's a rookie mistake. I'm always saying to people, never get anything with magic powder on it too hot. And to be fair, Lithgow seems to be having a good time in this movie. Like I mentioned, I'm sure he's probably not a fan of this. I'm probably sure he's never seen it since the premiere back in the day. I've no idea, but I think he does seem to be having a good time in this movie, and I think he, like I say, is really sort of enjoying playing that over the top role. So Joe gets taken prisoner for some unknown reason. He seems to be wearing the same thing every year when Santa visits him. With these two kids, nothing changes, right, in their lives year after year. Connie sort of writes to Santa telling him about the kidnapping, and you see what I mean? They're just throwing stuff in at this point now. We got a kidnapping thrown in just for good measure. It's just have a kidnapping. Comet and Cupid have the flu. Patch sort of finds Joe. They both take off in his flying car for the North Pole, unaware that the candy canes they have in the back could explode at any minute. The police come to get Beezy, who takes and eats loads of candy canes, and he sort of floats out the window. Okay, whatever. And Santa and Connie, following Patch and Joe, do the super duper looper, who land in sort of Santa's sleigh. And it ends with the two kids basically staying in the North Pole and Beezy just floating off into space. that's basically the end of the movie. And when I say the film is silly, yeah, it's silly. I mean, it makes no sense. And it's almost like, right, they got to 45-minute mark and you're what else can we do? Well, Patch can go rogue. We can have a Lex Luthor guy, and let's have a kidnapping. Have these two kids, and he can be like a wicked step uncle, and we can have an exploding candy, and we can, and we got a winner. We got a template for a great movie. But as I say, despite all of that, right? Despite all of that, and despite all its faults, despite all of that, and the plot and some of the shoddy dialogue, it will always be a Christmas movie. It will always be a Christmas movie I remember very fondly, and something I always associate with Christmas will be the Santa Claus movie. But it's so bad, it's so awful, but you can't help but just think, fair enough. Because I say, that first 30, 40 minutes, it just feels like a Christmas film. It really does evoke Christmas. And like I say, for the next 50 minutes, they're just throwing everything in. It's like a load of silly rubbish. But watch it for, like I say, for John Lithgow's over-the-top performance, which is quite amusing. There are a few little funny one-liners in there, and I think David Huddleston, like I mentioned, is a great-looking Santa. But if you remember the Santa Claus the movie, if it's a film you remember very fondly, let me know in the comments below. If it's something you remember watching at Christmas with your family, or when you was a kid, if you remember Santa Claus the movie being on, or when you watched it when you was little, did you love it, or did you even hate it even then? Who knows? But something I'll always remember. And to say Christmas without this, it just wouldn't be the same. It has to be on TV. So thank you very much indeed for watching. Hope you enjoyed the review, and I'll see you again soon.
Don't concentrate on the finger, or you will miss all that heavenly glory.